Hey, just doing an audio test for those in the room already with us. Can you hear me at all? Yay, audio is working. We just got a countdown going right now. It's at 4 minutes and 57 seconds. Once it gets to 6, we'll be officially live. So we already have about 96 people representing. We have over 200 registered. So we'll get started here shortly. Keep letting us know in the comments where you're at, and we'll get started soon. And we are here. How's everybody doing? Can you see me? Can you hear me? Are you with me? We got Tallahassee in the building, Tampa, Florida. Yes, yes, you can see me. Good. This is a regional webinar, which is freaking cool considering the topic is we're talking about a topic that sometimes gets misconstrued. Sometimes I get some pushback on, but this webinar is an example that people want to have this conversation. And I appreciate that you are here with me. Go ahead, continue in the chat for me. We'll give people about another minute or so. Right now, it looks like we have 116 logged in, and this is 116 across obviously our StreamYard platform, but also Twitter, or excuse me, X, the YouTube and Facebook. So this is a regional training, a regional free webinar across looks like 6 different platforms right now. And we're talking about, what are we talking about? Empathy, sympathy, and compassion. Empathy, sympathy, and compassion. Before I get started, I'm interested to hear from you in the chat, because I already see we got Pennsylvania in the building, we got Florida in the building, we got Michigan in the building, we got Georgia. Tell me in the chat, why are you here? What brought you here today? Because you're not getting paid to be here. It's not a mandatory thing, I don't believe, unless someone made it mandatory that I was not aware of, but I didn't make it mandatory. I don't have that authority. So tell me in the chat, why are you here? What brought you here? You got a million things on your plate. You got so many other things going on. I know in the work that you do, you're constantly helping others. So that means they're giving you training all the time. They're already giving you training. So why did you sign up for a free webinar? Talk to me. I want to know. I want to know why. It looks like we got Pamela says, need to remember my why, so we don't lead to burnout. I think that's incredibly important. And that is one of the main factors why burnout happens, is because we kind of lose track of our why. Looks like Christine says, I want to be human in a heartless world. Yeah, it can feel like that. It can feel like that sometimes, for sure. Cheryl says to communicate with fellow-minded people. Okay. Communication is key. Nadia says, I work for United Way, and I want to make sure I serve my clients the best without judgment. Got a lot of different reasons. Let's see, to deal with, to work with others that are not empathetic. We have some people that work in career advisory. There are some people that might be exhausted by the media, it looks like, as well, which I think we can all relate to. The world is crazy and I want some peace. Yes. Yeah. And I appreciate the fact that you're taking it in your own hands. You're saying, hey, what can I control? What good can I put into the world? And that's incredibly important for what we're talking about. Dottie says to remember we are humans. Yes. Yes, we are. Um, Burke, better communication with my youth and stress management. Like that. If you dedicate yourself to a profession where you're helping other people, and especially if you're helping young people, I mean, kudos to you. Kudos to you. Learn more information to communicate with peers and providers. So my coworkers, my peers, my professional life, my personal life, and then Tara says the stress is real. Yes, yes, it is. Okay, let's talk about staying human, rediscovering our empathy, sympathy, and compassion. So everyone that registered via StreamYard, I also asked you to submit a question that you would want answered during this webinar. And some of the questions I got were phenomenal. So I didn't even get a chance to read through all of them, but instead what I did is I put them all on the wheel of names here, which I'll show you towards the end of the workshop. And what we're going to do is we're going to spin the wheel and we're going to answer as many questions as we can. And when we answer these questions that you submitted, I want also your feedback on the answers. I don't have all of the answers. I'll give you my opinion based on my experience, but I also want to hear what yours is as well. So we're going to allocate about 15 minutes, hopefully maybe even more, towards the end of this to talk through some of the questions that you submitted. And we're going to do it in a random way so that we will try to get to as many as we can. Also, the reason the chat is on the screen is because I want interaction from you. I'm used to being able to hear you and you could talk back with me. I prefer that. But in the platform we have here, we're going to lean heavy on the comments. So continue to keep that discussion going through our webinar. I'll answer those questions as I can. But if somebody puts a comment or a question in there that you want to have feedback to or say something to, go ahead on it. That's not going to bother me or affect us at all. It looks like we got about 118 people logged on with us. So let's get this thing going here. Let me give you some background first of how we got here. So what you're looking at right now, and let me hold up before I make that larger, is I create a lot of videos about empathy on Speak for MC's YouTube page. Empathy, I think, well, actually, I'll say empathy, in my opinion, is the most important tool to inspire change and help others, to positively persuade others in a way that could help them. I think empathy is the foundation of all change. It is something I'm incredibly passionate about. I think when it's applied appropriately, not only can it help others, but it can help you as well. So with that, I make a lot of videos about empathy. And would you believe that out of all the topics I talk about, this tends to evoke the most pushback on social media. So the reason this webinar happened is because I recently put a YouTube video about cognitive empathy up because I've consistently seen people just define it incorrectly. And look, it's not my job or my business to correct people on social media. If that is a full-time job that I do not have the mental capacity to commit to. So I am not trying to correct everyone who might frame things in a way that's not accurate. We'd go crazy trying to do that, right? But I was seeing consistently people framing empathy in a way that just, it kind of hit me. It kind of hit me wrong because I believe in its impact so much. And we've got to a point where we're either explaining it correctly or there's certain people that just weaponize it. And they want to use it as some sort of negative tool, or they want to use empathy as a way to minimize others' perspectives. They want to say it's some sort of manipulative tool or it's a weakness to demonstrate empathy. And I said, you know what? Let me get involved here, and I'm going to make it I'm going to explain empathy in a very simple way and I'm going to make a quick video. I think it was like 40 seconds just to help clear up some of the confusion. You would think that the comments would say, okay, let's have a discussion about it. But instead, there were some very interesting responses. So let me show some of these with you. First, if you look on the left to this video, this individual says, please, people, read a blanking dictionary for 10 seconds before making a YouTube video. So the implication there is that I did not educate myself on empathy. And if I would have, just for 10 seconds, I would not have made a video so poorly. So I wouldn't have made a video that was so incorrect as this one if I had just read the dictionary. So, that was great feedback. Then they go, empathy is not sympathy. It is not. Empathy is not sympathy, is not understanding. So I'll be honest, I'm not sure what that means. But what was interesting with that comment is I am already explaining empathy. So I'm not sure what was going on there. And then let's see here. And this is my favorite part at the end. This is why my kids are becoming stupid. So there you go. This video that I made led to this individual's kids becoming stupid. And then the other interesting one here is on the side. It says cognitive empathy. This was on the same video. Cognitive empathy. What WTF is that? Empathy is about emotions, not ideas. Empathy is about emotions, not ideas. So what is my point here? Because I know what some of you might be thinking is, hey, you can't read all these comments, you can't get hung up on negativity on social media. I don't know how much it could thrive without elements of negativity. So that's not really what stuck out to me. What stuck out to me with this is people were actively discussing what empathy is and what it isn't. And they were very passionate about what they believed it is used for and what they believed its true intent is. So what I found the most perplexing about this discussion is that they did seem that they cared about empathy enough to correct me in thinking I explained it wrong. But then when they delivered their critique, they did not deliver it in a way that'll increase the likelihood that I receive their feedback. So in other words, they wanted understanding without communicating in a way that'll help them be understood. They wanted empathy, but they didn't want to give it. And this is something that we see, or I see constantly, is we say, hey, I have a goal and I have something that's very important to me. And I want you to also see how important it is. But I'm not going to help you get there through a way to communicate that increases the likelihood that we could find common ground, that we could have conversation. So we want something so bad. I want you to understand what this is, but I might insult you. I might brush you aside. I might categorize you. And then I do the very things that conflicts with the thing we feel is so important to us. So because of all that, I said, let's have a webinar and let's have a real discussion on what this is. And my goal here isn't after this to say, okay, you're always going to be empathetic. That's not possible. You're always going to be compassionate. That's not possible. We're human. And that's what I mean by staying human. Being human is not always pouring into other people and always doing the right things for other people. Being human is making mistakes. But I think the core and our goodness is, what do we do after that? Can we think beyond our initial reaction? Can we reflect? Can we prioritize being intentional with others and really asking ourselves, like, what do we want? Who do we want to be? What is our legacy? What impact do we want to have on others? And I think if we ask ourselves these questions, we can rediscover and be more consistent with being human and being a part of this this social construct that we have, this social agreement we have with others to support and lift each other up. Just for a little background, if you don't know, most of you do know, but here's some of my background. I was a group home worker. That was one of my very first jobs. I was over in South St. Pete. I was a director of a YMCA, area manager of a federally funded program, transition director, and then founder of Speak for MC. And now Speak for MC, everything is about inspiring change, short-term change, long-term change, and disrupting the status quo. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to talk about sympathy, empathy, and compassion. But before I get to sympathy, in the comments, in the chat, give me a statement that shows sympathy. Give me an example of what someone would say if they want to demonstrate sympathy for another person. What is sympathy? Show me in the comments. What is a sympathetic statement you might say to a friend, to a coworker? Maybe you put it online. What is an example of sympathy? Go ahead and tell me in the chat. What is an example of sympathy? It's a good example, Shelby. Shelby said, I'm sorry for your loss. Period. Yep. Christine, I understand the loss of your father. I lost my dad as well. And that's a good example, Christine, because you're starting with sympathy, but then you're kind of leaning into some emotional empathy as well. Siobhan said, I'm so sorry to hear about that. Yep, you're a common one. Tristan said, that's terrible. I'm so sorry. Sorry you're going through this. I'm here for you. A lot of sorry. I'm here for you. Josephine, my heart goes out to your family. I understand how you feel. I hear what you're going through. I'm so sorry to hear that. What can I do? Awesome. So let's start there then. Let's look at sympathy. A lot of us showed some good sympathetic statements, and then some of it we even took it another step. So let me adjust my thing here. Let me take the comments off just for 1 second. Okay, so sympathy involves recognizing and feeling concern for someone's challenges or concerns. It acknowledges the other person's situation. But here's the key with sympathy. And when I'm explaining sympathy, empathy, and compassion, I'm doing this because I want to challenge you, and I want to challenge myself to be more intentional with the way we communicate. Be more intentional with how we interact with others and say, okay, what can I give in this moment? Can I give sympathy? Can I give empathy, or can I give compassion? And then understanding what that means. So sympathy acknowledges the other person's situation, but doesn't necessarily reflect a deep understanding or shared experience. So here's some examples on your screen. A friend says, I'm sorry you're feeling stressed about the job hunt. That must be tough. A professional says, I'm really sorry to hear you're feeling overwhelmed about finding a job. And on social media, it might be something like, I'm sorry to hear about your layoff. I hope things turn around for you soon. Hope things turn around for you soon. And I saw that Pamela says the audio, she lost a little bit of audio. Can everyone still hear me? Is that just Pamela, or did we lose it for everybody there? It's back. Awesome. All right. So when you're seeing these statements, I'm so sorry you're feeling stressed. I'm sorry you're overwhelmed. I'm sorry about your layoff. What is the commonality with these statements you're seeing, professional, personal, and social media? What does this tell you? What is sympathy? What are some of the commonalities you're seeing with these sympathetic statements? Tell me in the chat. What do you think is the purpose of sympathy with these statements? What's the common theme that each person is saying? Tristan says, feeling sorry, feeling bad for him. Yep. What else? Kim says there's some acknowledgement. Yep. A feeling. LaDonna says, everybody's sorry. Yep, everybody's sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Making a connection. So the key about sympathy is sympathy allows you to acknowledge suffering, acknowledges the pain they're going through, but it allows you to do it in a place that does not require you to emotionally sit with it yourself. It allows you to show recognition or affirmation, but from a distance. So a really good example on social media, this happens all the time, right? Like you'll see a sad story come through, or maybe you have a Facebook friend that says they're going through something, and then you hit that care button, right? That's why they got the care button on Facebook. It's like the hug. Call that the sympathy button. So sympathy says, I don't necessarily have time to take a deep dive with you on understanding. I can't pour too much of my emotional cup into this tragedy or to this thing that's going on, but I will acknowledge your suffering. I will say, you know what? That sucks. I will show you that. And before we talk about the pros and cons of sympathy, we got to keep it real too. Sometimes sympathy is all you can give. Think about your social media feed. If every single tragedy you see, if every single thing that goes wrong, every single friend or coworker or person in your neighborhood that's going through something, you're giving all of yourself to that situation, your cup is going to be empty, and there'll be nothing left for yourself, and eventually that's going to erode some of the most important parts of your life. So sometimes just giving sympathy is okay if that's all you can give. So let's look at some of the pros and cons here of sympathy. The pros, obviously, it does acknowledge their struggle, which is important. If I'm sharing something with you that I'm really going through, and you're like, hey, is what it is, have a good weekend, that's not going to make me feel good, right? So pros of sympathy, it does acknowledge the struggle that person is going through. And that is the first step. That is where it starts. Before you could get to empathy and compassion, it usually starts with a little bit of sympathy. It can build rapport. It can show that emotionally you kind of get what they're going through, and it can lower tension. If someone is pissed off because they don't believe anyone cares, right? Like, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. Sympathy could be a really good way to show, hey, I'm here. I get it. All right. I might not be able to fully be there with you, but I see this. It does look like you're going through some things. So those are the pros of sympathy. There are some value and some good things about sympathy. Before I go on to the cons, in your experience, what are some of the cons of sympathy? Like, what are some of the drawbacks of practicing sympathy in your experience? Talk to me. What sometimes could be some negative effects or could be hard about being a sympathetic person or showing sympathy? What do you think are sometimes the cons of being sympathetic or practicing sympathy? What are some of the drawbacks you think? Burke said if it's not genuine, absolutely agree. If you're just paying a lip service, right? You're just saying it because you feel you have to say it so the optics look right. That could actually have a worse effect, for sure. Not sincere again. Yep. Even though Pamela says, even though you say understand, people might feel like you don't really understand. You're just saying it. That's a good point. We had I was interacting with someone not too long ago, and I said, I can't understand what you're going through. And so she then explained what she was going through. And then I said, I understand. And then she was like, no, you still don't understand. So if someone does not feel that you're truly understand where they're coming from, saying that you do can actually cause that opposite reaction and might cause a little offense. Laura says some people are in their denial, anger stage of loss, and they'll fight back if you say you understand. Yep, that was very similar to the situation I was in. And then people could take advantage of sympathy. Yeah, sometimes they can. So let's look at some of the cons of sympathy. The very first one of sympathy is if you think sympathy is all that's needed to move the needle. So if you're in a helping profession and you're trying to help others towards change, or you're trying to solve a problem, sympathy alone is very unlikely that'll have any real effect. If you want to, let's say, change legislation, just saying how bad the situation is and stopping there won't change legislation, right? If you're working with someone who recently got fired and you're just like, wow, that really sucks to get fired, and then nothing else happens after that, just because you demonstrated sympathy, that sympathy alone has no impact on actual problem solving. So one of the main issues with sympathy is if you just stop there and think that's enough, if you're in a profession or a role where you're supposed to help people get to change. Sympathy can also blur professional boundaries. Obviously, excessive sympathy can almost appear as if you're condoning behavior, or you're explaining behaviors away, or you're justifying behavior. If you just constantly feel bad for someone without looking at the underlying issues and potential solutions. And then sympathy fatigue is a very real thing. Again, if you're always mourning, or your heart is always pouring out and into tragic situations, and you're constantly pouring that emotional cup out, you can eventually be fatigued, because there's no shortage of negativity, but there's also a lot of positivity too, which is why we have to balance our cup. The main thing with sympathy I want to explain is if your goal is to help someone or inspire some sort of change, sympathy alone will not do it. It can be a starting point, but if it's just that, there will be no long-term sustainable impact with regard to your role of helping that situation, right? So maybe your goal is not to get involved and be an active participant in whatever the topic is. If that's the case, then sympathy might be all you can give, and that's okay. But what we want to be careful about is to say we truly believe in helping someone change or a situation change, but stopping at sympathy, thinking that will move the needle. It just won't. Now, if we want to move the needle, then the next stage, and what I think is the foundation of all change, is empathy. And this has been proven by thousands of studies that have shown that when someone interacts with an empathetic, non-judgmental listener, it reduces defensiveness and it reduces anxiety. And if I am less defensive and I am less anxious, I'm going to be more likely to be open-minded. And if you have two open-minded people having a conversation, you're going to be more likely to find common ground. And then that common ground will lead us to solutions, will lead us to change. Empathy is the foundation of every conversation if the goal is change. Am I willing to be open-minded? And am I willing to recognize nuance? Now, this is an important part about empathy, and I was showing you that with the YouTube comments. Empathy takes two to tango. If you're going to have real change happen, you got to have people that are both empathetic working together. But one person has to take the lead initially, right? Usually in conversations, especially if the topic is really emotionally triggering, or someone feels really just invested into continually thinking how they think, one person in that interaction is going to have to say, okay, you know what? Even though the way this person is communicating with me, I'm not a fan of, and it's not how I would, I'm going to put aside how I feel for a moment to be the bigger person and practice empathy in this interaction, with the understanding that if I am being empathetic with them, it'll just naturally disarm the individual, disarm the situation, and encourage that person to say, wait a minute, I feel heard and listened to, and I'm not judged for how I think, which will allow them to they'll start thinking in a more nuanced way to say, wait a minute, maybe I was wrong about how what I'm saying would be received, meaning what else might I be wrong about? Because if I'm wrong about other stuff, let me find out what that is. And now they start to get off just I only see things one way to possibly there's another way to look at it. If you want empathy in return, you have to model empathy. And often someone in that interaction has to decide to be that first person that's going to take the lead. Now, this is one of the topics that I get a lot of pushback on social media is when I separate empathy in two different definitions. The one is cognitive empathy and the other is emotional empathy. The people that usually attack me and get on me are the people who favor emotional empathy. They yell at me. They call me names, which again is ironic because the people that are advocating so much more for emotional empathy, when they interact and disagree with me, their initial reaction is to react emotionally, which is to point fingers, categorize, say you're wrong, say you're dumb, stuff like this, right? Which is why I like to also teach about the other part of empathy, which is cognitive empathy. And cognitive empathy is less about feeling what you feel and more about understanding what's driving the behavior. Because all behavior is a symptom of what we think, what we believe, what our experiences are, what we value, our faith, our trauma, our successes, our failures. All behavior is a response to that. The behavior is not random. It can look random, especially on the surface, but underneath is the stuff that's driving it. So when you practice cognitive empathy, you're taking an active interest in understanding that person's worldview. You're saying, I understand that you are the main character in your own movie. I understand that the way you see the world has been shaped since you were a baby. I want to try to get in those shoes to see it how you see it. I won't be able to see it how you see it exactly, but I can try and get some more understanding. That's cognitive empathy. And cognitive empathy is really important in high stress or high triggering situations. So an example of that is like my background. I worked in some at-risk populations. If I learned that someone I'm working with maybe hurt a child, emotionally, it's going to be very hard for me to say, can I sit with you from an emotional side and try to understand what you were feeling during that situation and why you felt you had to do that? I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm probably going to be triggered. But can I, from a cognitive standpoint, if my job is to help you, say, all right, what caused the behavior from your perspective? What was the underlying motivation? What were you actually thinking? What were you thinking that led to this behavior? Can I get to a point of understanding? Maybe I can. Now, there might be some topics that you're just not going to be able to empathize with regardless because they're so triggering or they're so hard to wrap your brain around. I have some specifically with kids. If someone hurts a kid, I'm going to be honest, it's going to be very hard for me to empathize with you. It's just, it's going to be very tough for me to get there, right? Let's say you stole a car. I worked with at-risk population. I'm going to be able to get to a point. All right, let me understand what's going on there. Not justifying or agreeing, but let me understand. But I say all that to say you gotta ask yourself, is this a topic? Is this a conversation? Is this something that I can truly push aside my ego to try to understand what's going on? Can I? This is an important question to ask yourself. And this is what staying human and being human is being intentional and being honest with yourself. Like, what can I do? What can I bring to this conversation? How can I communicate in this moment? What's my goal, right? If your goal is change, then you say, okay, what type of empathy can I provide? Can I provide cognitive? Can I provide emotional? Can I provide both? Maybe I only have the ability to do one. So cognitive empathy is strictly what's going on from your perspective. I want to learn about your worldview. This is when you ask questions. This is when you reflect. This is when you actively listen to the other person. This is where they dominate the conversation, not you. If you find yourself talking 70% of the time, that's not cognitive empathy, because you're doing all the thinking. Cognitive empathy is you're allowing them to have the wheel of the car and they're driving the conversation. The main thing in order to practice cognitive empathy is you have to suspend your ego. Every person is the main character in their own movie. Every person likes to talk about the things that are important to them to people who they think also feel it's important, right? So cognitive empathy, though, is I'm going to push aside the stuff I feel is important in this moment. I'm going to push aside what I think we should be talking about, and I'm going to prioritize your worldview. I'm going to prioritize your perspective, and I'm going to actively listen. And it's going to be very hard to do this if you don't truly care about the person's worldview either. So if you're not truly interested in their perspective, no matter how good you are at your questions, it's going to be hard to truly active listen. And then the emotional empathy is where you really prioritize the feelings of someone else above your own. This is where you actually try to sit with them emotionally and feel what they're feeling. Like an example of that is, let's say you're working with the homeless population, or you're working with someone who is homeless. From a cognitive empathy standpoint, you might be able to get to a point to understand what's going on there, what led to that, what's holding them back from taking advantage of resources, stuff like that. But maybe emotionally, you're like, I don't get it, right? Like, I'm not feeling it, what they're feeling, what they're going through. I'm not trying to ignore it. I'm just not feeling it. So what you can do is go volunteer at a homeless shelter. Go to a program that serves the homeless population. Go to a food kitchen. Go seek out experiences that'll help you better understand and feel what it's like to go through what they're going through. And if you can do that, that'll allow you to better get to a place of emotional empathy with that person. Obviously, anytime you draw on your own experiences to sit with someone, that's also emotional empathy. If you have a coworker that calls you because she lost a loved one, or maybe they had a parent pass away, if you reflect back on a time where you lost a loved one or someone you really cared about passed away, that feeling, by really tapping into that experience, allows you to sit with them emotionally. And then that's you practicing emotional empathy with them. So the main thing is with cognitive empathy, it's can you prioritize their worldview and ignore your desire to take control of the conversation or your desire to get them to think differently. Can you push all that aside and prioritize understanding? That's cognitive empathy. And then emotional empathy is, can you feel or reflect back on an experience or go seek out an experience that'll help you feel what they're feeling? Cognitive empathy is best for understanding and problem solving. Emotional empathy is best for establishing trust, respect, and rapport. Both are incredibly important. You don't always have to provide both if you can. If you can provide both, that's the strongest form of empathy. But sometimes you can't. And maybe whatever your situation only allows for one. So the pros of, let's go to the pros here of empathy. Builds trust, helps you understand the client's situation, helps uncover real barriers and needs. Cognitive empathy is also understanding that what the person usually says on the surface isn't the whole story, right? Like, so if they say, I'm not working because no one will hire me, if your immediate response is, well, that's not true, let me I have a place that will hire you, and you immediately send them to that place, you might be operating on or solving a problem that's not the actual core problem. Cognitive empathy in that situation would be asking more questions and trying to understand. When you say no one will hire you, like, what do you mean by that? Like, when was the first time you kind of realized that that might be going on? And you ask questions to take a deeper dive and to figure out what's happening, as opposed to jumping to problem solving because you already think you know what's happening. Right. So cognitive empathy is taking that true understanding, and cognitive empathy helps keep your own emotions in check. There have been situations where I've adamantly disagreed with someone, like passionately disagreed with someone. But if I prioritize cognitive empathy, it allows me to disconnect emotionally from that to better say, okay, what's actually going on here? What they're saying makes me mad, but I'm gonna push that aside because I want to figure out why they're saying it and what's leading to it. And it could be a really powerful tool. Now, the drawbacks of cognitive empathy, it can feel too clinical at times. It's depending on the situation. If someone just wants emotional empathy and you're just firing off open-ended questions, tell me about how that makes you feel. What are your concerns about that? What do you think can happen to solve your problem? It can feel a little too like you're trying to put therapy on the person. So you got to really understand the timing and the place. And then it does require time and active listening. To practice true understanding, it's not going to be, a 3-minute phone call or a quick meet at the door. It does take time to really feel that it takes time for someone to really know that you care beyond that initial 3-minute conversation. And then the other thing with cognitive empathy, and this is a lot of pushback, is it can be manipulative. And in fairness, some people do use it for the wrong things. Sometimes salespeople, and I don't want to, this is not a shot at salespeople at all. So I got to sell some things, but sometimes salespeople will appear as they're demonstrating cognitive empathy, but it's really with the intent to find out what will help them better sell you what they want to sell you. And that's not using empathy in a positive way. That's using it in a more self-serving way, right? When you're using cognitive empathy, it's because you're trying to understand so you can help them and empower them towards their change, not try to get them to buy something, right? So it can feel sometimes like manipulative if it's being used in the wrong way, or if you're acting like you want to understand someone's perspective, right? But you're only doing it so you can kind of get them in a gotcha moment. You're trying to ask questions to lead them so you can prove them wrong, like it's a debate, right? Like I'm gonna prove you wrong. I'm gonna make you look like a fool, but I'm gonna first pretend that I'm interested in your perspective. It could appear as if it's manipulative. So too clinical, manipulative. It can require time. Notice some of the drawbacks. And on emotional empathy, Christine says, yeah, how does that make you feel? Sometimes I don't need a therapist. Yeah. Sometimes people don't want to solve with you and look deep. They just want to know that, all right, you see I'm going through it, and maybe just hear me for a second and let me move on with my day. That might be how someone feels. Emotional empathy, the pros, it strengthens rapport, strengthens human connection. It can motivate others. But the big cons of emotional empathy is it can lead to emotional fatigue and burnout, especially if you don't balance it with self-care. It can blur the lines, and it can really it can lead us to this cycle where we're always sitting with someone emotionally and we're always acknowledging that suffering and feeling it, but we never then take the next step to trying to solve it. And that could be a problem too, because if you're always hearing someone vent, or you're always putting yourself in someone's shoes emotionally, and you're taking on their burdens and their pains and what they're going through. Again, mental health is a zero-sum game. You might think, I'm good, it doesn't matter. Put as much as you want on me because I can take it all. I admire that mentality, but no one has an unlimited mental health cup. They just don't. So eventually it's going to get so full that the easy things then become hard. The things that normally didn't cause you stress, you're now really anxious about. The things that normally didn't frustrate you and maybe cause you to be short with someone, now they are. And a lot of times that's because your cup is full and your cup is full emotionally. So you got to be really in tune of where you are if you're going to effectively give to someone else, right? So emotional empathy is, how do I feel? How do they feel? And can I pour into them and feel with them? If you do it too much, it'll definitely cause fatigue and burnout. But again, the pros, it can really strengthen connection and show someone that you care. And then the last part before we go to our questions is, let's talk about compassion, because I think compassion is something this world needs a lot more of. A lot more of. I used to think that, hey, we need more empathy, which I think there's definitely in our discourse, we need more empathy. Oh my goodness. I will leave this universe happy as can be if we just start adding more empathy in our communication with others at schools and the workplace. It's my passion, right? But what the world needs right now, I think the world needs a lot of compassion, because what compassion is not only do you sympathize, not only did you take an effort to better understand, you then felt compelled to act. You did something about it. And so the example there on the screen is, I know searching for a job can feel overwhelming. You're connecting emotionally, but then you say, let's work together to create a plan. I'm here for you. Let's find some training that'll help you with your goals. Compassion, almost always, true compassion comes with a compassionate action. You're doing something about it, right? And it doesn't have to be this grand thing, but maybe you have a coworker that's really going through it because they lost a loved one. Not only were you there for them, you sympathize with them. Not only did you sit down with them and you allow them to talk about their favorite memories with that loved one. Then the next day, you know what you did? You brought them lunch and you said, "Hey, I got you this book, this gift where you can write down your favorite memories of your mother or your father," right? You took it that next stage and then you demonstrated it with an action. So compassion is, all right, I am ready to move. I'm ready to do something about it. I've felt it. I've talked about it. I've heard about it. Now I want to do something about it. So the pros of compassion, it definitely strengthens clients' trust and hope. For those that are on with me that are in a helping profession, the quicker you can make a compassionate action in that interaction, the quicker you're going to be able to establish trust and rapport with that person. Like I just, for some context, I just started mentoring myself. After mentoring for 30 minutes, right away, I'm like, okay, I know what I need to do and bring with me for the next time we mentor. I need to show that I'm willing to take action after hearing this young person's perspective. So compassion drives action. It builds trust. It promotes healing. It improves. It helps make you and that person you're helping a collaborative partnership. It shows we're on the same team and we're here with each other. Now there like everything else. There's some cons to compassion, and it says on their pros, but this is the cons. Obviously, like with anything, it's compassion fatigue, and it's pouring constantly into someone else. It can also, if you're always hand holding someone else, or you're always doing something for them, you're always alleviating the burden by working harder for them than they're working for themselves. That can actually have an adverse effect long term, because essentially they'll get to a point where they'll view their success as an extension of you. Primarily, you are the reason that they're successful. Which the problem with that is, then what happens when you're gone? What happens when you're not as involved? If the majority of their success is a reflection of the things you're doing, right? So if you're always taking that act for them, that can be a drawback with compassion for sure. And a strain on resource, you might just not have the time. right? If you're out driving all over the county for someone else, now you get back and look, you got case notes backed up. You got a bunch of emails you didn't answer. You might be a parent and you were supposed to, you told your little daughter or your son that you would take them to the playground, and now you're gonna have to push that back because you spent time doing this other thing, right? It can really strain your physical and your emotional resources if you're always prioritizing compassion with others. So again, this, you have to ask yourself, and all I'm asking you to do is be intentional and saying, what can I do in this moment? What can I give? Is all I can give is sympathy? Or can I take a little bit of an understanding to give more empathy? And then after I hear, can I do something about it? Can I take an action towards it? Maybe I can't personally, but can I put a referral out and pass it to someone who can take a compassionate action with them, right? All I ask, and at the core of being human, and this is my challenge, is just be intentional, honest, and authentic in what you're trying to do. That's it. The thing that makes us less human is when we pretend, when we're faking it, when we say, oh no, I really care, but you don't. You're just doing it for theatrics, right? You are not a bad person if you don't give someone sympathy. As long as you are being intentional with yourself and saying, the reason I'm not is because I can't, or I just can't get my place to choose I want to. If you're being honest and authentic, then you're human, right? But if you can, if your goal is change, if your goal is to inspire change, be authentic with yourself there too, and say, I don't really maybe want to hear their perspective, but my goal and who I say I am is to help this person. So I'm going to push aside my ego and prioritize empathy and try to understand what they're going through, right? Be intentional, be authentic. That's all I ask. That's the only challenge. So with that being said, with our time, let's look at some of these questions. And I went really fast on these three topics. So I hope that was explained in a way that made sense and was helpful. But let's get to some of these questions to drill down a little more here. Let me know if you see my screen. Let me know if you see my screen. Is there a, hold on, we'll remove this. We'll put this up. All right. Can you see my screen? Is there a wheel up there with me and my tiny superhero? Can you see that on the screen? Does everybody see that? Okay. Awesome. Okay. So we had about 200 and I think 203 people registered. About 150 of those people put questions in. So we're not going to get to all these questions, but let's answer it. Whatever the question is, I don't know what's going to pop up. I want you to go in the chat and answer it as well. Let's answer it together. There, I don't think any of these. All right. So how do you work with those who want to consistently challenge you? How do you work with those who want to consistently challenge you? That's a great question. Is anybody in the chat? Do you ever work with people who challenge you? Or is that just this one person? Do you ever work with people who challenge you? Stephanie says, I'd like an answer to that one too. Yes. Okay. All right. So if you're working with someone who wants to consistently challenge you, right? So the first thing is to say, all right, remember my only thing I want is for us to be intentional and be authentic, right? That's all I want. I want us to be intentional and authentic. So the very first thing you got to ask yourself is, what do I want in this situation? Do I want to potentially change this dynamic and help change its behaviors and find out what's going on so we can fix it and work together collaboratively? Is that what I want? If that's what I want, then empathy is the answer. I have to ask questions. I have to learn. I have to hear their perspective. And then I'm doing all this with the hope that they will then give it back what I'm giving to them. By me modeling empathy they're going to look at that conversation in a more nuanced way, and we're going to find some common ground. And if we can find common ground, now we have a place to work from, and now we can work from a place that's more collaborative. So you have to really lean into empathy in situations like this. Hey, Johnny, you mind if before we leave today, we can kind of talk a little bit? And then you say, hey, I noticed at the meeting, you know, you were sharing your perspective, and I really want to hear more about kind of what brought you to that. I suggested an idea, but then I noticed you were like, hey, you know, I think we should go a different way with this. Kind of talk to me about, you know, what was going on there. And you listen and you try to understand. And then you can say, hey, well, do you mind if I kind of share some feedback myself? Or you mind if I kind of share how I was looking at it, right? And now you're having this conversation where you're having a collaborative conversation and getting there. If your goal is change. Now, with this same question, maybe your goal isn't change. Maybe you're like, you know what? I'm sick of this person challenging me. I'm over it. They just need to listen, right? Then your goal is not empathy in that. Then how do you work with them? You very definitively say, it is what it is. It's this way to highway. You're not going to disrespect me again. And that's all there is to it, right? Maybe you put a more hard line in the sand. But that hard line isn't going to necessarily create change. That's just creating a compliance approach. And then that person's only going to be compliant to that as long as they feel there's a reason they have to be compliant, right? Like if you're a parent, kids are a really good example, right? If you're, I'm tired of hearing you go clean your room or else you're going to lose TV. That isn't going to teach them the value of cleaning their room. That just teaches them that if they don't clean their room, they're going to lose something that they want. That's only as sustainable as the loss of that thing they want still affects them. Does that make sense? So I say all that to say is if someone's challenging you or a situation is challenging you, you got to ask yourself, what am I trying to accomplish here? And if you are authentic with that answer, you'll know what you have to do. You'll know what you'll have to do. So that's a great question. I also see some phenomenal answers in the chat. Really important question. Let's do another one. Let's do another one. Let's see what we got here. Simpler ways to be more compassionate. Simpler ways to be more compassionate. Well, it can be, I remember, and I don't know if this would classify it as simple, but I remember working with a young person who had to increase her reading or she was going to fall back significantly. But she didn't want to read. Now her surface behavior seemed like she was being defiant, but I'm sure really it was about her feeling embarrassed that at her age she couldn't really read, right? But what I did notice is that she had a puppy, and that puppy, she was real affectionate with it. It was something she was really proud of. She was really happy about that puppy. So the next time I met with her, I brought a book on how to train your puppy, like fun tricks, right? So that then said, I'm gonna take an action to help you in a way, but help you in a way that connects with you and shows I care about the things you care about, right? That was a compassionate act. Some other ways, some really simple ones, open the door for somebody, open the door for a stranger. Right? Let that stranger have that parking spot. If you see your neighbor struggling to get the garbage can, you go help them with it, right? There are so many things you can do to take a compassionate action for people. And you'd be surprised like how much the small things can have a ripple effect after that. You know, it's funny if you ever notice, if you hold the door open for someone, and then you kind of stick around, they almost always hold the door open for the next person themselves, right? Like compassion acts are contagious. If you're kind to someone, if you do something for them without any expectation of a that you'll get something out of it, that type of stuff is really contagious and can go a long way. So the way you treat people out in the world like really matters. You might not think it does, but yes, Ms. Garcia says, just saying hello and being kind to somebody is just a compassionate act in your busy day. If you're in a rush, but you see someone needs help. The other day, a car stalled out on the middle of the highway, and immediately cars behind it were beeping aggressively because you couldn't tell it stalled out. It just stopped. So they thought that this car was just not paying attention. And then the guy gets out of the car and he starts trying to push it himself. And then immediately two other people behind him get out of their car and help him push it to the side of the street, right? I know for a fact that everyone who saw that, for the most part, passed that forward or paid that forward later. They did something compassionate or kind, right? Compassion is extremely contagious. You get to have a positive effect on your community and others through the amount of compassionate acts that you demonstrate. Let's knock out a couple more. Brenda says smiling, acknowledging someone. Yep. How to still be you when a person is not empathetic. I love that question. So this goes back to authenticity. This goes back to being honest with who you are. And this also is a very important point that I did not mention earlier when talking about empathy. No matter how empathetic you are, no matter how kind you are, no matter how compassionate you are, no matter how good you are at listening or asking the right questions, or no matter how bad you feel for them or your heart breaks for them, there is no amount of any of that guarantees a response from that other person. You do not get to control how someone else behaves. You just don't. The thing you get to control is, who are you? When you lay your head to go to sleep at night, are you proud of the things that you controlled? The choices that you had control over, the behaviors you had control over, are you proud of those? If you are naturally a caring person or you're naturally an empathetic person, someone else shouldn't get the opportunity to change that piece of you, to change that about you. So I say all that to say is your desire or drive to be empathetic with someone is not dictated by them. It's dictated by you and you being honest with yourself and saying, can I give this? And do I want to give this? And do I believe in this? Right. And I know it's easier said than done sometimes. I know people can behave in ways towards us that really makes us angry and frustrated. It makes us have a pessimistic view of the world. But those people that do that should not get the reward of changing who you are or making you react in a way that does not reflect on who you want to be. So stay in tune, stay in line with your authentic self, what you value, the type of person you want to be, and commit to that. And if you're interacting with somebody that you feel is taking you away from that, then maybe we got to exit that conversation. Maybe you got to exit that interaction. There are some relationships that are not good relationships. There are some relationships that bring out the worst in us. And that's it. We got to be honest with ourselves and say, okay, maybe I can't be in that. I can't be in this conversation, right? Because you cannot have the expectation that you'll change somebody. You just won't. Now, you can have an impact on them. You can plant seeds. You can potentially persuade and influence them. But there's no guarantee you're going to, and there's no guarantee you could change them. The only thing that's guaranteed is, will you, and that's not even guaranteed. The choice you got to make is, will you behave in a way that reflects of who you think you are and who you want to be and who you want to be remembered and the things that make you proud. So it's hard when someone is not being kind, when someone is not being empathetic. Try to say, okay, you know what? Their behavior is a reflection of them. It's not a reflection of me because I know what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be kind here. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to problem solve. I'm trying to help. And you know what? I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. And there's peace in that. There's peace in that. And then let's look at Laura's comment real quick, because I think this is an important one before we go to this question. She said, everyone's allowed to have their own feelings. And that's such an important point, Laura, because feelings are subjective, and feelings have nothing to do with right or wrong. People get to feel however they want to feel, right? So if you're upset by how someone feels, or you're saying you shouldn't feel that way, that's just not a, it's not a, I don't know how else to say it, but it just don't make sense, because feelings are subjective. They're not right or wrong. If I'm mad at you and I truly feel that way, don't tell me I shouldn't be mad at you. I feel mad at you. So you telling me I shouldn't be mad at you is going to make me madder at you, right? So you can validate feelings. You can validate how people feel about a situation. That's not the same thing as validating behaviors and validating ideas. That's separate, right? You can always validate feelings. We have a question here. How can we intentionally foster empathy among students through a school system challenged by focusing on testable subjects with very minimal ability to teach health topics? So this is a loaded question, and this is a question that I am very invested in. I can't get into too much of that on this specific platform, but I can tell you that I am strongly advocating and will be fighting for strategic empathy and cognitive empathy to be taught in our schools, to either be contracted out through guest speakers and workshops, or to eventually be added to curriculums. Because the ability to talk and communicate with a fellow student who thinks differently than you and looks at the world differently than you, but you being okay with that, like that's not bothering you because you're interested in understanding why they think that way, and to say, you know what, we don't agree, and that's okay. Because you know what we do agree on? This other thing. And this other thing means we could work together and we could be collaborative, right? So having empathy taught in our schools, I definitely think it's possible. We just have to convince a lot of people who sometimes think empathy is a whole nother thing. It's not. And I'm not going to get into the politics of it right now. But if people tell you empathy is a weakness, if people tell you empathy is condoning behaviors, if people are telling you that empathy means that you have to sacrifice your own morality and what you value, tell them, hey, Curtis did a training that's on all of his social platforms. Why don't you grab a coffee and watch it? And then let me know what you think, but don't say it like that. Make sure your tone is good. You know what I'm saying? But I am going to be fighting for and advocating for empathy to be taught in our schools. Maybe not on all levels, but at least on high schools. Imagine our high schoolers graduating, not only with like all reading comprehension and exceeding and all these different areas and going into the career, but imagine them also going into the world in their communities thinking, hey, I'm interested in different perspectives, not because I want to change my mind, but because I want to understand, because I understand that the more I know who I'm working with and that they know me and we're listening to each other, the better chance we're going to have to accomplish some really important things, right? So that's one of my issues I'm going to be focusing on big time. So stay tuned for that. I am advocating for empathy in our schools. All right, I got 109, so we're just going to do one last one and then wrap this thing up. Maybe I'll do a part 2 if y'all are interested. If what I'll do is send out a survey after, and then you can let me know if this was any value to you or if you want a part 2, and then I can do that. All right, last one, and this is a really good one. Tips to prevent or recover from compassion fatigue. This is so incredibly important question. Burnout, compassion fatigue. So here, they did some studies on this and they looked into compassion fatigue. And here's what the baseline is. Here's the root cause of it. Obviously, if you're constantly pouring yourself emotionally into people, that can lead to it. Obviously, if you don't feel valued at your work, that can lead to it. But the other thing that really, when they drill down on compassion fatigue, what's happening is as soon as I feel like the amount of work I'm doing and effort I'm making in the areas that are important to me versus the successes I'm seeing in return in the areas that are important to me. As soon as that becomes way out of balance, I start to get burned out and fatigued. So, in other words, if I became a teacher because I really value that one-on-one time with students, and I love helping students maybe that otherwise wouldn't be successful, and seeing them be successful. And I love being creative as a teacher too. I get to add my own creativity to the projects we do, and I get to teach them about science. I love science, right? If that's my thing, and I get to a point where I realize, wait a minute, I'm not seeing, my work doesn't have a lot of that. I'm not seeing a lot of successes. I'm so burdened with all these other things. When's the last time I had a win at work? As soon as you start feeling like that, then you start to get fatigued. And then you start looking at other job opportunities. And then maybe you start getting to that point of it is what it is. And some people just start going through the motions. And the more you just start going through the motions and say it is what it is, it becomes this cycle. We become even more fatigued and then resentful and then frustrated. And then you want to say, well, if this one thing changed, that would make me happy again, which is not true, right? And it's this cycle that just gets worse and worse. So I say all of that to say, to prevent it, make sure you're seeking out successes that tie to the reason you got into that job in the first place. They don't always got to be big successes. They can be small ones, but make sure you're seeing successes. And if you're not seeing them, go find them, go seek them out. And maybe some cases, like teachers are a really good example. You might go through a dry spell where you're not seeing them. Then maybe go find them, like go volunteer at an organization like maybe like a humane society because you love animals, and go help the animals. And that'll be a great experience. That'll give you the energy and a motivation to kind of refill your cup a little bit and get you back to where you need to be. So go find successes, go seek out the wins in the things that are important to you and that make you happy. And that can kind of get you back. But once the balance becomes, I'm just doing a lot of stuff just because I have to, and I don't feel appreciated, and I haven't even got wins or successes that are connected to my why, that gets us to a place where we really start to burn out, and it's hard to move forward. So you got to go find your own successes sometimes, the things that make you happy and bring you joy. Make time for that. And we always prioritize the things that are most important to us anyways. We have a list of things we do every day. Move the thing that makes you happy to the top, that gives you success connected to your why. Awesome. I cannot believe how fast time went. It is already 1:13. Just real quick, because I want to respond to some of the comments. John Curtis, how does intrinsic and extrinsic motivations play into compassion fatigue? That's a really good example, because your intrinsic, again, is your why to why you got in the field. If you wanted to help students, when you're helping them and you see how they're growing, that's driving your intrinsic desire that's connected to your why. Whereas those extrinsic motivations might be, hey, I need a pay raise over here, right? I need an award for being the best person here, and that's okay too. You want to balance those. The thing that doesn't work though is if you don't have intrinsic and you're hoping that the extrinsic stuff can keep you there. It's not going you long term. Like a pay raise might feel good for the moment, but eventually you're just going to end up living back to the means of that new wage. So that wage is now normal. It's not a raise anymore. And then now you're sitting there, you're like, well, why am I motivated? Right. So you want to have a balance of intrinsic and extrinsic. But if you're a supervisor or a leader, make sure you're still recognizing and giving those extrinsic motivations for sure. And that goes back to Misha's comment too. Sometimes lack of recognition for the work can have an impact. 100%. You got to affirm and help people see the successes they're having. That's incredibly, incredibly important. All right, people. I cannot believe we did it. If you've ever participated in a training with me before, I much more prefer to have conversations with you and we go back and forth. So me just talking at you for an hour, 15 minutes was kind of, an interesting dynamic. But we capped out at around 150 people at one point. Right now, we're already 15 minutes over and we're still at 86, which is incredible. I'm going to send you a survey. You can let me know your thoughts on what we discussed. If you want a part two, if you want a different topic. And then when I email you, if I did not answer your question, can you just email it back to me and then we'll talk right through email? Or if you want to have a conversation, reach out to me and we could talk as well. I'm here to help. The only reason I did this is to help. So I hope that it did in some small way. So I appreciate y'all. Before we wrap up, are there any comments, questions about anything we discussed before we conclude our stream? Awesome. Got a lot of thank yous and affirmations in the chat. I appreciate that very much. I'll email you what I said I would, and then we will talk soon. I appreciate everybody. Keep doing the important work. Bye, everybody. What empathy is and what it's not. Let me ask you a question. In order to empathize with someone, does that mean you agree with their behavior? Hopefully you said no. So then if you empathize with someone who made a decision that you would never make, does that mean that you are condoning their behavior? No. Cognitive empathy means that you understand everybody is the main character in their own story. So when you practice cognitive empathy, you're not justifying or validating ideas, you're just trying to understand.